Hey folks, it is Christmas Eve 2022. I'm here by myself at home. My wife's visiting her in-laws, so I'm here by myself for a few days. And I've been thinking about doing a video like this for a while. Every time Christmas comes around, I think about the old days, living as a teenager, junior high and high school with my parents, and how I had a section of the basement to myself where I built my own stereo and stuff, made my own amplifiers, had this big stereo made out of homebrew parts and things. And many of us who are in the organ business, of course, we have an affinity for organ music, and we heard a lot of these on records. A lot of people got into the business from hearing organs in churches they attended. For me, my dad was a hi-fi buff, and that's how I was exposed to organ music as a kid, and stuck with me for all these years. So I wanted to do a little video tonight, I guess it's about 7 o'clock in the evening, and talk about my top 5 favorite organ records of all time. Now, when I say organ records, I mean I first heard all of these on vinyl. Some of these I don't have the original vinyl copies anymore, but everything I'm talking about here I heard on vinyl. And they're in some order. I mean, I rank them 5th to 1st, but hey, you know, there's a lot of fantastic records out there, but I'm kind of talking from the golden era, for me, I would say 1987 and back. I'm not including anything that was originally released on compact disc. Even though there's zillions of fantastic recordings out there, that just isn't the point. So let's start with number 5. Encores à la Francaise, Michael Murray at Boston Symphony Hall. This record, I believe, and this is the copy that I had as a teenager, I believe I bought this at Music for All in Denver. Some of you from that area may remember Music for All in Cherry Creek right off First Avenue. Fantastic record store, which I believe was owned by a member of the Denver Symphony Orchestra. As with so many record stores, long gone, and the whole area, you know, doesn't resemble what it used to be. But this record I got, I believe, right around my birthday, right around my 16th birthday. And if you've never heard this one, it's really fun. As the title says, Encores à la Francaise. He's not going for subtlety here. It's all French music, well, except for Bach, the Symphonia from Cantata 29, played at Boston Symphony Hall and recorded by the Soundstream digital system, I believe. And this is a Telarc recording. And boy, they put out some humdingers back in the day. It's fun. It's bombastic. The both 32s in the organ are used to great effect. I love it. The Boston Symphony Hall organ, I presume it still does, it's been rebuilt, had a 32-foot full-length contra bombard of some sort and a 32-foot wood violone. And Michael Murray uses them both in this a lot. And it's fun. And he puts on a fiercely rhythmic version of the Marcel Dupré Carillon Opus 27 on this, which I absolutely love. And so number 5, Encores à la Francaise, Michael Murray. Number 4, E-Power Biggs Hindemith organ sonatas at Busch-Reisinger Hall, Harvard University. This record was released with different covers. Here's 2 copies, and I think this is the later version here, kind of a generic cover for reissue, and then this looks to be the more original one. Issued in both mono and stereo. This one I bought at Wax Trax in Denver about a decade ago, but this is identical to the copy that my dad bought. As I remember, we got a copy of this at home in Colorado, where I grew up. Target, of all places, had a record sale. This was in about 1980 or 81. It was either 6 records for $5 or 5 records for $6. I don't remember, but they just had boxes and boxes and boxes of records of all kinds. Just, I don't know where they got them, just overstocks or whatever. And Dad, coming home from work one time, went by the Target store, which I believe was the one on East Mississippi Avenue in Aurora, for those of you from Denver, and just happened to get this. He just found it and thought it would be interesting. Well, for me, as a youngster interested in organ music, the only organ record I had any knowledge of was Bach on the Biggest, and we'll get to that later. Lots of reverberation, not a very clear recording. And then I heard this. And for those of you that aren't familiar with this, a lot of people love the Bach recordings that E-Power Biggs did on the Flentrop organ at Busch Reisinger. And they're fine. They're good. But this is where E-Power Biggs really shines, I think, because they're spirited renditions. They're great, very rhythmic, and really fun. The crisp and clean, no caffeine sound of this organ suits the music beautifully, I think. And so I give this number 4. E-Power Biggs, the 3 Hindemith Sonatas at Busch Reisinger Hall. Number 3, Jennifer Bate at Beauvais Cathedral. This is volume 4, Mass of the Pentecost, with the Verset pour la Fête de la Dédicace and the Celestial Banquet on the same album. I bought this in the spring of 1985, again at Music for All, and it was this copy right here. And I had been attending organ concerts around the Denver area for a few months at that point. I had just gotten my driver's license. I'd been going my parents had been taking me up to that point. I started going to some. And I went to a recital by Michael Gailly at South Denver Seventh-day Adventist Church on the Zimmer organ, and he played the Ascension, which was the only Messaien I was familiar with at the time. Later, I heard Douglas Maycomber play the Nativity by Messaien at the Geary Auditorium, the big auditorium at University of Colorado that has the Austin. I can't remember the name of it right now, but you'll know. I'm sure people are screaming at their monitors right now because I just can't remember the name of the auditorium. But anyway, that was all the Messaien I'd heard to that point. It's like, oh, this is really interesting stuff. Yeah, I don't know, So I bought this record, and not knowing what it would sound like, and I put it on, and whoa, my impression was that it was the soundtrack to a nightmare, which is a compliment. I love that kind of thing. It's just bizarre, just far out, because compared to the Nativity or the Ascension, the Mass of the Pentecost is pretty abstract. Not as abstract as things that came later, but still pretty intense. Fantastic recorded sound, wonderful reverberation on this very, very bright, thin, Baroque, neo-Baroque style organ by Daniel Gonzalez at Beauvais Cathedral. But a fantastic series. I have all of the Jennifer Bate recordings of the Messaien. And so number 3 goes to Jennifer Bate at Beauvais Cathedral with Messaien. Number 2, A Stereo Festival of French Organ Music by E-Power Biggs. Here it is. Love this record. It's zany and it's crazy. I'm not quoting the Addams Family here. It's just, this is E-Power Biggs at his unleashed best. I mean, this album is almost funny to listen to. It's so not authentic to some of the music. For example, this was recorded at St. George's Episcopal, Stuyvesant Square, New York City, on the 1958 Moeller organ designed by Ernest White, which also has parts of the older 1912, I think, Austin organ in the back of the room. Now that I know something about recording, and my cat's walking around, that's why I'm a little distracted. Okay. The 32-foot reed on this recording is just overwhelming, and now I understand listening to it. They must have stuck the microphones directly over the resonators in the back of the room because it's so powerful and so over the top. It's actually a little bit strange sounding to me now, but I still love it. This record has, in my opinion, the single best version of the Vidor Toccata that's ever been recorded. You heard it here first. I love this one. I love it because it's not so fast. You can actually hear what's going on inside all the voices because it's not all slurred together by somebody trying to race through it. He takes it at a more leisurely pace together with that incredible, ridiculous 32, and it is a masterpiece. I just love it. This was released in both mono and stereo versions. So if it's the stereo version, it actually says a stereo festival up at the top, whereas this one just says a festival of French organ music. They're both actually called a festival of French organ music, but the thing up at the top here actually says a stereo festival, where this one doesn't say that. Oh, he plays the Saint-Saëns Echo Fantasy on this record. And you know, for those of you familiar with the piece, you're supposed to have two flutes on, one manual, one on one manual, one on another, and then you alternate manuals, and it sounds like a flute, and then a quieter one, it echoes. Well, E-Power Biggs chose not to do that. He used a flute in one hand and a crumhorn in the other. So it's sounding like ducks quacking during the Echo Fantasy. It is exactly not what Saint-Saëns hoped for. But again, it's just wacky, good fun. And unfortunately, this record, to the best of my knowledge, has never been released on CD. I would love to see that happen. So it's number 2, A Festival of French Organ Music by E-Power Biggs. And of course, number 1, you guessed it. How could it be anything else if it was me? But Bach on the biggest, Robert Elmore at what was then called Atlantic City Convention Hall on the largest organ in the world, the Mid-Merloche, 455 ranks. Now, before I made this video, I actually went downstairs because I was getting all these vinyl records out, and I listened to this copy, which is not my original copy. I bought this a few years ago, and it's in very good condition. And compared to the version, the reissue that was done by the people in Atlantic City, the ACCHOS, quite frankly, the vinyl version, it sounds like garbage. It's terrible. It just doesn't hold a candle to the reissue, because I think what was going on is that the organ signal, the organ was so powerful, the tape captured it, but then in order to cut it onto vinyl, they had to limit things a whole bunch, because if you have, for those of you into this kind of thing, if you have signals that are of large amplitude but of opposite phase, it can make the needle jump out of the groove. And you have a lot of big low end on this record, right? But if you play the record and play the CD back to back, there's just no comparison between the channel separation and how low the response is of the recording. The CD recording just wipes the floor with this. But now here's an interesting thing I'll note. Here's a monophonic copy. Here's a stereo copy. Listen to them back to back, and you will find that the monophonic version is actually a different performance than the stereo version. That's right. You heard that right. They didn't record it in stereo and then mix it down to make a mono record. They did a separate session for the monophonic version than they did for the stereo version. And if you read the notes on the back, it actually says that when they recorded the monophonic version, they used a single microphone, where for the stereo version, they used 3 microphones. So it was a separate setup. And if you listen, there are subtle differences in the tempo and some of the articulation between the mono version and the stereo version. So if you find a mono version at a record store somewhere or a thrift store, pick it up and give it a spin. It's actually kind of interesting. Not very good technically. If anything, the mono version sounds even more out of tune than the stereo version, but it's still interesting for historical context. So this is the record. Of course, the reason I give it number 1 is that this is the record that got me interested in pipe organs in the first place. When I was a little kid, my oldest brother put this on. I told you my dad was a hi-fi buff, took the grills off of the old AR2 speakers with Dynaco amplifiers and cranked it up, playing the toccata and fugue from this record, and seeing the speaker cones move captivated me when I was a little kid and never let go. It was organ music doing that. And that was it. So this is the record that started my career. It's not the greatest recording of an organ ever made by a long shot, but as Wilma Cozart wrote in a letter to me in 1993, they were trying to capture the organ's last sounds. That was in 1956. They thought they were the organ's last sounds. So here, from the perspective of 2022, the organ's sounding better than ever, and it's interesting to look back and what they thought was going to happen to the organ, because they thought it would probably die out and never be heard again. So there you go. So number one, I give to our old friend Robert Elmore with Bach on the Biggest. Now I've got two runners up, and they're not technically organ records, but I'm going to count them because organ plays a big part in them. And I don't have these on vinyl, but runner-up number one is the Organ Symphony, recorded in 1958, I believe. Charles Monk at Boston Symphony Hall, again, with Bert Zemkotchian organ. Yeah, I know. It's the Organ Symphony. It's not technically an organ record, but this also has, on the CD reissue, they put Debussy, Lemaire, and Jacques Ibert Ports of Call on it, which is very nice. But I'll say this. I heard this on vinyl, and it was also on open reel tape back in the day. The organ chord that starts the last movement, when the organ comes in, is the single greatest organ chord ever recorded. It's just the most beautifully balanced, big, full organ C major chord ever. It's just fantastic. It's what a well-balanced organ should sound like, in my opinion. Love it. And the 32-foot violon is used in the little interlude parts in that movement. Beautiful. So, first runner-up, Boston Symphony, Organ Symphony. Number two, runner-up, Virgil Fox playing Symphonie Concertante in France on the Palais de Chaillot organ, which is the old Trocadero Cavaillé École that was moved to the Palais de Chaillot and is now in the Auditorium Maurice Ravel. There are a lot of recordings of Symphonie Concertante out there. This one, as far as I'm concerned, is the best. And I think this was recorded in the 1950s, late 50s, early 60s maybe. And again, lots of verve, lots of fun. Virgil Fox actually seems to come in a little bit early at times when he's alternating with the orchestra. He kind of jumps in a little bit. It's fun. It's exciting. I heard this. My brother had this on vinyl. I think he bought it at a record store in Utah, and many years later I tracked it down. I couldn't find it on vinyl again, but I did find this EMI Classics reissue. It's called Matrix 2 on EMI Classics, and it's combined with Arthur de Grief Piano Concerto No. 1 in C minor, which is also a nice piece. But if you're looking for some good organ and orchestra combination, you can't beat this. The Poulenc organ concerto for timpani and strings, that's really nice. It's good. It's great. But this is the one I think that's the best. There was a recording made at Davies Symphony Hall in the 80s on the Ruffati playing Symphonie Concertante. And my opinion, it's dreadful. That's a Michael Murray record. It's not his fault. The Ruffati on that recording just sounds terrible. And it was widely panned when that record came out. I remember reading the reviews at the time, and people didn't like it then, and I still don't like it. But this one is really fun, really exciting, and if you can find a copy of this somewhere, I would advise you to buy it. So there you have it. The 5 favorite organ records of mine. I'm sure a lot of you will disagree, and there are tons of records that I left out, of course, because there were millions and millions of organ records produced through the ages, but those are my favorites, and hope you enjoy this little review. Leave your comments in the section below and let me know what your favorites are. And until the next time, I'll see you later.